Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined with the amazing Terence Cover. Terence, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right.
It is amazing to have you here. But before we talk about why you're here, Terence, I want the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. Terence attended the Motion Picture Institute of Michigan, where he graduated in '05. Gotta say, love the Michigan guys, as you all know. Who's been working in the indie film world ever since, and he does his YouTube series Tales of Narcissism, where he tells true stories about himself in a way which is hopefully entertaining, which I think it truly is. Now, I want to rewind a little bit. You attended the Motion Picture Institute of Michigan. What gave you the drive to decide that's what I want to do?
To make movies or to go to MPI specifically?
No, just to make film in general.
To make movies, the big motivator was actually the film The Burbs.
Ooh.
I was in high school and I had just gotten broken up with the first time from my first serious relationship. It was Valentine's Day. I was super depressed. My dad said, let's go rent a couple of movies and have some pizza. So I picked out a Corey double feature. I got The Burbs with Corey Feldman and then Fast Getaway with Corey Haim. And while watching The Burbs, I realized I just spent 90 minutes not thinking about why I was depressed. And
Right.
so that was what cued me into the magic of movies, getting to go into another world and just forget about everything else for a little while and just enjoy yourself. So that's what got me into movies. That and Lloyd Kaufman's book, Everything I Need to Know About Filmmaking I Learned from the Toxic Avenger, which showed me that I could do it on an indie level and
Right.
it didn't have to be just the Hollywood stuff. So,
And Uncle Lloyd is a very good place to start. And that's actually a really, really good segue because you also co-founded the Trauma Dance Detroit Film Festival, which you ran for 5 years. And what I love about this is, and Devil's Night Gallery, for anybody that's not a Michigander, Devil's Night is the night before Halloween where you go out and you just cause mischief. Don't get crazy, don't burn down buildings, don't be an asshole. Just go and have a good time. And now it's a film and art event which will have its 6th year this year. Now, this is amazing. Obviously, Trauma Dance, you hear the name Trauma, you automatically think of Uncle Lloyd. Running the film festival, this is an amazing thing. And to go hand in hand with the art gallery, what got you? You said you co-founded it. Who is your co-founder with you, and what gave you guys the drive to actually want to start a film festival in Detroit?
well, Trauma Dance Detroit itself was founded by myself and Mike Hartman. I had worked with him on a few films he had made, and we had actually gotten one of those films distributed through Trauma, Heavy Mental. And then we had been working on another one that we were hoping to get through Trauma. And so we had those connections already. And then we're both people who were inspired by the indie spirit of Trauma in general. And I had seen firsthand what the Trauma Dance experience was like by going out to Park City when they were still doing it out there. And that itself was inspiring. And I wanted to bring something like that to the area that I lived in, which is the Detroit area. And Detroit is such a great place for indie film, indie art, indie music. It's a perfect hub for all of these things, and there's no reason why we shouldn't have something like Trauma Dance, which the version we created, we wanted to encompass all of those things, not just filmmaking, but art and music and burlesque performers and any other oddities that we can throw in. So that was sort of the impetus to start that.
And I want everybody listening to remember what he just said. Detroit is a beautiful place for art, for music, for film. It does not look like 8 Mile, like RoboCop. Like these movies portray us. Listen, if you come to Detroit, I've always said this, the people that talk the most shit about Detroit are the people that have never been to Detroit. When you come to
Absolutely.
Detroit, it's such a beautiful city. When you go at nighttime, especially after everything Mr. Illich did with Ford Field, Comerica Park, the new Little Caesars Arena, and all the surrounding areas right there, downtown Detroit is a beautiful, beautiful place to be. And you're right, the indie music scene, the indie art scene, the indie film scene is all so beautiful. And you have all these other, major films now that are picking up to do location stuff in Detroit. The Don't Breathe films, It Follows, The Barbarian. These people are starting to realize Detroit is a beautiful place to film. I mean, could film in a little bit prettier spots of Detroit, but it is still a pretty good place to be. So, are you still in Detroit now?
Well, I'm in the suburbs of Detroit, so
Mhm.
I'm on the edges. I work down in Ferndale, which is literally on the border of Detroit, so
Yeah.
it's always near to me.
Well, we will have to go and grab some mom's spaghetti sometime, man. So Terrence, obviously, you've done a lot of things in the horror genre. You've been working your ass off in the horror genre for a long time, but in order for you to be such a big influence in the horror genre, in the Detroit horror scene, horror had to start for you somewhere. So, Terrence,
Right.
I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And, Terrence, the first horror movie that you watched was.
Poltergeist, the original.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What an amazing, amazing film. And it's funny because I didn't talk about this movie on this podcast for a long time. And
Mhm.
now I'm meeting a lot of people who this was their first horror movie. And it's like, this could go down as one of the top three all time PG horror movies.
Oh
So,
yeah.
do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen it?
I don't remember my exact age. I was definitely younger than 9. At the time, my parents actually owned a CED player, which
Uh-huh.
forever I thought was Laserdisc, but it was actually a CED player. I later learned. But they only owned like 5 movies on it, and one of those movies was Poltergeist. So at some point in my very young childhood, I remember like watching that film multiple times, and like that was my first exposure to horror.
And it's one of those movies that really, even now, has stood the test of time because it's a horror story, it's a paranormal story, but it's also a really good family drama too. Like there's a lot of love, a lot of family ties that goes into this film, a lot of, parental love, sibling love. It's one of those movies that I just think is so close to perfect. I mean, you have Spielberg working on it. There's just so many amazing things that goes on in the world of Poltergeist that people kind of push under the rug. But do you remember who you were with the first time you'd seen it? Were you watching it by yourself, or was it your parents that you were watching it with?
I would assume the first time I watched it, it was probably with a parent. But I can remember watching it on my own as well.
Mhm.
At least back in at that time.
Right. And it's funny because a lot of people look at this movie, especially back then, it's like, oh, it's PG, just throw it on. I think the first time I watched this movie was on Fox 36 at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, shitting my pants out of fear. Which brings me to my next question. Actually, there's a lot of very effective scenery throughout Poltergeist. But what would
Absolutely.
you say is the scene that affected you the most?
Well, definitely the scenes that affected me the most from this film were any of the scenes with like Carol Ann and the static on the TV. I don't know why I've always been drawn to that specifically, but that element of that film is something that's carried on through like all of my artistic endeavors going forward. Both of the experimental short films I've done were like focused entirely on around the television and specifically the static on the TV and stuff. And I feel that has to go back to that early exposure to that film. So it got in there deep, and
Mhm.
then and that's what's lasted.
Well, and I think a big thing of that, and I'm not trying to downplay anybody that's younger than us. I think we're right around
Sure.
the same age. But when we would go to sleep when we were kids watching TV, we would wake up to the static. Once
Right.
our VCR had stopped and it rewound the tape for us and powered off, we had that static with that. And
Yeah.
that's just something that, as kids, especially after watching Poltergeist, you're like, no, I'm good. Shut the shit off. Um, and it's the whole movie has those elements to it of things that you're supposed to be able to be trusting and loving of, like TV static. No harm there. A tree in your front yard. It's just a tree. It can't reach in my window and grab me and eat me. Oh, it can. All
Yeah.
right, cool. So, we know which scene affected you the most, but what would you say your favorite scene from Poltergeist would be?
Um, Favorite is probably that kitchen scene. The famous scene where, it's just the mom and Carol Ann, and Carol, like the mom is learning that there's actually something going on here. And, obviously the most impressive shot is when she turns around and suddenly the chairs are all stacked on the table. It's so simple how they did it, but it's so effective, and it's amazing that they pulled that off. And then like that scene continues on when the dad comes home, and then like Carol Ann getting pulled across the floor and all that stuff. Like
Mhm.
that for me is the meat of the film.
Well, especially when you're watching at a young age. And what I love about that kitchen shot, it is an unbroken shot.
Yeah.
So the way that they pull it off, especially as a young kid, you're like, wait a minute, what the hell? And then you get a little older, you're like, they didn't even cut. How'd they do that? So when you're
Yeah.
watching moments like that, especially as a kid, we don't see and we don't understand the magic of the movies to make this happen. So it's a lot scarier when you're actually watching these play out as a kid and you're watching your peers. Carol Ann was a young girl, she was right around our age, and you got her brother Robbie, who's right there. So
Yes,
the
absolutely.
movie really focuses on our age group at that point. So we're watching our peers go through this stuff, which I think, in my opinion, was a lot scarier at that time.
Especially since it's a PG horror film. So like you said, parents are just letting kids sit down and watch it because of the
Mm-hmm.
rating. And then we're seeing ourselves in that scenario. It's great.
And it's built into a franchise. The Poltergeist franchise now has 4 films. You have the original trilogy and then the remake. I always ask this when I'm doing a franchise. What
Plus
is
the
your
TV
favorite
series.
film? Oh yeah, and the TV series. What is your favorite film in the Poltergeist franchise?
I think it's still probably the original. Um,
Mhm.
both of the sequels have their own elements that are still very effective, and they aren't slouches in all of the departments that the first one is in. But I gotta take the easy answer and go with the original.
That's I don't think anybody would argue with that. This is one of the few, like the original trilogy. If you tell me your favorite one is 1, I understand. If you tell me your favorite one's 2, I understand. If you tell me your favorite one is 3, I understand. 3 is my
Yeah,
favorite. And it's just that thing of each one of these movies is super effective in their own way, like you said. Reverend Kane from Part 2, one of the most underrated villains of all time, in my opinion. You know,
absolutely.
that guy is terrifying. So I completely get why you could choose any of them. And were you a fan of the remake of the Poltergeist film?
I don't think I'd ever watched it, but for this interview, I sat down and watched it today. And I didn't really like it. But
Mhm.
there are elements that I can appreciate. There's some stuff that they did do really well.
Yeah.
There's just really only a couple of things that kind of hold it back for me. So overall, I would say no, I didn't really like it, but I appreciate what they were going for.
Yeah. And like there's a couple really like the scene in the closet with the power tools. Like there's some
Yeah,
definitely good scenes in it. It's just the execution didn't come off very well. I completely agree with you. So um we know about Poltergeist being your first horror movie and what that movie means to you. But now, Terrence, I would like to throw you a little bit of a curveball here for a second. My little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Terrence? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
well, that's a tough one. You know, if I wanted to give the pretentious answer, I would absolutely say Possession with Sam Neill. Um, but if I'm being more honest, I love horror comedy. So I'm gonna pick probably either Chainsaw Massacre 2 or Gremlins 2. Those are definitely favorites that I've watched lots of times. But if you want to talk just strictly horror, then I'd have to say the original The Exorcist.
Mhm. And it's funny because I absolutely adore The Exorcist. I still think it's the scariest movie ever made. I think
Yeah.
that the impact, I was proven wrong. I said that there would never be a movie that would make people cry and scream and puke in the theater. And then Terrifier 2 came. Kudos to you, Terrifier 2, because you proved me wrong. You made me look like an asshole, and I'm so glad you did. But I just wish if I could choose one film to go back and see on opening night, it would be The Exorcist. There's just so much, and I'm very excited about the reboot. Maybe it won't have the same impact as the first one did. And it's gonna be very hard to do that,
Yeah,
but it is going
absolutely.
to introduce a younger audience that has never seen the original to that film. Because just like Halloween 2018, when Halloween 2018 came out, sales for Halloween 1978 that year went up like 63%, I think it was. So you're going to have this younger generation go back and revisit the original Exorcist. And maybe we're going to introduce some people that had never seen it to it. So any remake, any reboot, any requel can have its benefits in the long run. So, man, we've talked about your favorite horror movie, your first horror movie, and all this has been so amazing to me. I can't tell you how much it means to be able to do this and talk to you about this type of thing. But before I let you go, Terrence, I always go back to the same question. We're going to bounce back to Poltergeist. And what we're going to do here is rank this on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking this movie on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. What we're doing here, Terrence, is strictly ranking this movie on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Terrence, what would your ranking of Poltergeist be?
I hate to do it, but I'm going to give it a 4. And that's just because for a long time, I actually forgot about the movie. Like
Right.
I remembered having it as a child, but I forgot about what the experience of watching it was like until like, you know, even after high school, I finally rewatched it. And that's when I was really like, oh my God, this is a masterpiece. So
Yeah.
just because I'm the idiot and forgot about the movie, I'm going to give it a 4.
No, and I completely understand and respect it, man. Like I said, it without Poltergeist, who knows if you would be the person that you are today. And while
For
we're
sure.
talking about that, I should have said this at the beginning, guys, but I do have all of Terrence's social media links down in the description, as well as his YouTube link. So make sure you're following on social media. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. You're going to want to check out Tales of Narcissism. You're going to want to be along for all the upcoming things that he's doing. And we talked a little bit earlier about the festival. Do you have an here in 2023? Do we have a set date on when the festival is going to be going on?
I don't have a specific date yet. If I do go with, if I'm able to get the same venue that I got the previous year, they like to do it on the very end of October. So the last time we did it was actually on Devil's Night, which was great. This year, unfortunately, Devil's Night doesn't fall on the weekend,
Of
so
course.
it'll probably be that Friday or Saturday closest to it. But I do have devilsnightgallery.com where I will have all of the details up once they're set in stone.
And there it is, guys. Guess what? That link is also down in the description. So make sure you're following along. Because, like I said, if you're anywhere in the Midwest, I'm going to try my damnedest to be there. I'm not that far away. So once we have all the dates set, I'm going to do everything I can to be up at the festival this year. I would love to meet you. We're going to be at a film festival. We're going to be hanging out, having a good time. And it would be an amazing experience to be able to meet all of you. So, as I said earlier, make sure you are following all the social media links and subscribing to the YouTube links down here in the description. So, Terrence, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you.
Right.
Everybody else, as always, if you haven't already, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment. It really does help the channel more than you know. And until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.